Hey everyone, and welcome to the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Rube, today was a big day because we got to talk to Jonathan Gannon for the first time in a long time.
Oh, I thought you were saying it's a big day because we're doing the podcast in the same room.
Well, that's fun too.
Dave's right over there.
Yeah, now you're really giving him an inside the look.
Inside the look.
It's a little inside baseball here.
Yeah, but it was good. We got some time with Jonathan Gannon, who he loves talking to us. He just doesn't do it very often. And it was interesting. It was illuminating in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and so much has happened since the last time we spoke with him. So we'll kind of get into some of the big takeaways from that press conference. Also got our first chance to talk to James Bradberry because we are not John Clark. We did not talk to him already at the airport. So today was our first chance to do so. Some takeaways there. And also, Rube, piggybacking off of that, your top Eagles cornerback duos of all time. We want to kind of go through some of that list and try to figure out where you think Darius Slay and James Bradberry will end up figuring into that list. And Josh Sweat, we talked to him for the first time since he missed a playoff game with some internal bleeding. So fascinating, scary stuff there. But we wanted to start with Jonathan Gannon because it's not only is it our first time talking to him since the end of the season and since he had 3 head coaching interviews, but it's our first time talking to him since Hassan Reddick, Nakobe Dean, Kazir White, Jordan Davis, and James Bradberry. So he has potentially 5 new starters in that defense.
Yeah, and I think the thing you keep hearing, I guess the common thread through all of Jonathan Gannon's answers to everything was versatile. It was just everything is about versatility. He's got a lot of new toys to play with, and guys, we would ask him about any player, and he would just talk about all the different things he can do and the value of that. And I think the way he put it is, you only have so many jerseys on game day, so the more guys can do, the more different combinations you can use, and guys are going to line up in different places with different people based on the matchup, based on the down and distance, based on the situation. Based on how they're playing, based on all that stuff. And they're going to be multiple. They're not going to be tied to any formation or, coverage or scheme. I think that's what he meant when he first got here and said, I don't have a scheme. He's going to do what he thinks is best in that situation. And, he's not going to come out and rip the guys that were here last year, but when you add the 5 players that you just mentioned, you can do a lot more certainly than you can do with the people that were here last year. And I think people are going to see that.
Yeah. And there was one part of the press conference where he was asked, are we going to see different things because of the players? And he mentioned that, no, we did what we wanted to do last year. And to be clear, I think he's talking about from a schematic standpoint. And my takeaway from it was we did schematically what we wanted to do. And I'm paraphrasing what I think he was saying here, but the players are just better now, and we'll be able to execute better because of that.
That was my takeaway as well.
Yeah, but look, I do think the breadcrumbs have been leading up to lead us to believe that the multiplicity we saw last year is going to increase, and a lot of that means yes, more 3-4. And I think that all the breadcrumbs are adding up, right? We have the multiple meeting rooms for how he calls them overhang players, but the edge players versus the interior defensive linemen. Pretty clear indication. And then you have the players themselves, from Jordan Davis being that classic zero tech to Hassan Reddick being a clear outside pass rusher. And he kind of confirmed that, I thought, on Tuesday.
Yeah, and we kind of suspected that. Look, I don't know if I don't think they're going to be a base 3-4 team, but I don't think they're going to be a base 4-3 team either. Again, I think it's going to depend on a lot of different factors. But yeah, it was the first time he kind of acknowledged that. There's going to be a lot of odd fronts that you're going to see, and we have the players who can fit into that scheme. And mainly the 2 you mentioned, I think can be really, really good 3-4 players, Reddick and Jordan Davis. But when you have versatile guys, they can do that. And like you said, it all kind of plays into the new meeting room structure where, they have meetings with, and I've never heard of this before, but I think he alluded to that other teams do it. But they're basically going to have, depending on the what the meeting is exactly about, they're going to have like a front seven meetings. They're going to where all the linebackers and all the defensive ends are, but they're also going to have meetings with just the edge guys, like the 3-4 edge guys, the overhang guys, and they're going to have 4-3 meetings, kind of a meeting room with just the guys that, as they line up in a 4-3, it'll be classic defensive ends and linebackers, and so the linebackers would meet as 4-3 linebackers in some meetings. In other meetings, the edge rushers would be with those guys, with the Sam linebackers. So it's interesting, and it kind of makes sense. And he talked about time on task. If you're in a meeting where they're discussing coverages or formations or schemes or techniques that don't apply to you, it's wasting your time. So you may as well be in a meeting with the guys that play specifically more to your position.
I'd like to make it very clear. I have never been in any such meeting that I felt wasted my time. And the boss just walked by. Yeah, we've all been in meetings like that, right? Where, you're up there and they're talking about stuff that doesn't apply to you, and they're limited with how much time they have overall with these guys. So it does make sense. I mean, and I think that's a structure that could change too as things go. I mean, they're going to see how it works. And it's funny because Jeremiah Washburn is kind of a key cog in all this. He's basically coaching up the edge players, which is funny because his dad had this wide 9 here how many years ago, and it's such a different defense than that was, but he's still going to be charged with teaching these edge players, and he's an interesting guy. Jeremiah Washburn is a figure in the organization that we probably don't talk about enough. He has a scouting background. He has a coaching background. He's obviously really into the coaching side of it now. But he's someone that building is very high on.
Yeah. And I mean, it's ironic because his dad was, the guy that Brandon Graham was just constantly at odds with when he was a young player. And I mean, you've all read the stories. I mean, Brandon felt like Jim Washburn held him back and didn't play him when he was ready to play. And he wasn't a very pleasant fellow when he was here, Washburn.
That's putting it very politely.
A lot of players had issues with him. He was I think the only guy that liked him was Babin. Babin was like his pet guy.
If the only guy that likes you is Babin, things are not going great.
That's really not a place you want to be. That whole 2011, 2012 was a nightmare, but that's ancient history. He's a different guy. I mean, Jeremiah Washburn's a different guy. He's got a bright future. Yeah, and Gannon's the same way. I mean, Gannon's been a scout as well. But everybody he talked to speaks highly of I don't know what do you want to call him, Wash too?
Everyone just calls him Wash, and you get flashbacks.
Yeah, Wash is still his dad to me, but he is very highly regarded. He's versatile. I think he's coached offense in his background too.
Yeah, he's basically a position coach now.
Yeah. So, but it's fascinating, and I think you look at Reddick. I mean, he's a classic 3-4 rusher. I mean, that's what he is. So, why not? Why not line him up that way? And they've always done some of it. I mean, Jim Johnson ran a few 3-4 plays here and there. You would do it just to change things up. You'd see different fronts, but I think you're going to see more of it this year than we've seen around here. Gosh, who was the last 3-4 coach the Eagles had?
Billy Davis.
Bill Davis, yeah, but that was kind of a bastardized version of it. Marion Campbell was a 3-4 guy, but yeah, it's going to be fun. I think it's going to keep offenses on their toes, and they're not going to know what they're going to see. And again, it's going to come down to the players getting the job done. But they've really upgraded so much that I think it's going to work. And they got, they've really turned over half the defense. So
we just mentioned 5 guys who, if they're not starters, are going to be playing an awful lot.
Yeah. And then you have a guy like Epps who's going to be playing more. So it's the one thing you wonder about is how how well it'll come together by opening day, because it's a lot of change, it's a lot of new faces, it's a lot of new looks that they're learning. But
I mean, I think it's helpful that they, obviously there are new players, but he still has a core of guys who were here last year. And it's not like he has a new playbook.
right,
They did these things last year. I think we're just going to see more of them.
yeah, yeah, and that's what he said, and it's gonna be interesting to see it come together.
Yeah. Any other takeaways from Gannon? It was our first chance to talk to him since he interviewed for head coach. He called it humbling to be in a position to interview. I don't know how close he was. It seemed like he was pretty close to that Texans job. I don't know for sure, but it seemed like he was at least one of the favorites.
Yeah, and I mean he's going to be a head coach if they have a top 10 defense for the next year or two. He's going to be a head coach. I mean, it's just a matter of where and when. But yeah, I think one takeaway, they're really genuinely high on Marcus Epps. I think there's been some thought that maybe the Eagles would go out and get a safety. I don't think they're going to get a safety. They love Epps, and
I'll tell you what, if they get a safety, I'm not sure Epps is the guy who will lose the time.
that's probably true too. I think we agree on Anthony Harris. Epps is probably their best safety. Honestly, I mean, he made more plays playing part-time last year than Harris did playing full-time, when you look at it. So that's fair. Who knows? I mean, they have other guys too. So we'll see how that all shakes out. I mean, what's Harris's contract? Do you remember? I mean, they can cut him, right?
They could. I mean, even if they sign someone, they won't, because I don't think they would, because they don't really have the depth there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not much at all. And it is cuttable if they wanted to go that route.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if they add somebody, and Kayvon has a good preseason. Maiden is there. He's played in the league a little bit. Yeah, I know. I don't know. I'm just not an Anthony Harris fan.
He's a solid player, and he's cheap.
Okay.
I think he's an average safety.
And I do think you can hide him better if you have Slay and Bradberry. I think Bradberry's an upgrade over Steve Nelson, so he's easier to. Look, you're not going to always have 4 All-Pro D-backs.
Yeah.
And, so you can live with Anthony Harris, there's no doubt. But they really like Epps a lot, and we'll see if their trust in him is founded.
It's funny. Jonathan Gannon is not the most popular guy among the fan base, and I get it. There were moments last year that were really frustrating, and playoffs didn't go well. They didn't play well enough. What do you think his chances are of changing the narrative about him in this city this year, given the talent that he has now?
I think they're very good. He's a good coach. He's got good players. So the defense is going to be improved. I don't really get all the hate. I mean, they were a top 10 defense without great players. Even with the Dallas game, they were 10th in the league. Without it, I think they were 8th. And yeah, they took their lumps. But again, I compare it to Jim Johnson, who's probably the best defensive coach I've ever seen. His first year, I mean, they were way worse, and they had much better players. I mean, they still had, Jim Johnson's first year in '99. I mean, they had Doc, and they had Troy, and they had Bobby Taylor, and they had Hugh Douglas. I mean, they had some really good players, and they were like 24th in the league in defense, and it was a terrible team, and they didn't make the playoffs. This team goes to the playoffs as a top 10 defense with really one elite player, Darius Slay, and they hate the coach, and it just doesn't add up. Jim Johnson's second year, now all of a sudden they're a top 5 defense. And, and eventually as the years went on, people looked at him like a folk hero, which they should. But I don't know since when you start, of making judgments on anybody after 1 year. I mean, it's, 1 year that really wasn't that bad. I think Gannon got the most out of what he had, especially the second half of the year. And I agree with you that he wasn't aggressive enough early on, and he adjusted. It was his first time in those shoes. But hey, if this city can grow to admire and appreciate and love Howie Roseman, which seems to be happening, it can work with anybody. They're going to build a Howie statue at this rate.
I don't know if we'll go that far.
Statue, Dave. Statue.
I don't know about that. Yeah, I'm fascinated to see what happens. And the thing with Gannon is last year, like they obviously were awful against great quarterbacks, but then on the flip side of that, they got the feast on some really bad ones too. Whereas this year, I think it's going to end up being in the middle.
Yeah, but the bad ones generally are the product of quarterbacks getting hurt, and we don't know.
That's true. That's fair.
So they might see some of those guys too. I mean, I was looking at that. I made a list of the 17 quarterbacks they face, or the 13 quarterbacks they face. Well, I guess, yeah. And yeah, it's a lot of guys in the middle. I mean, but let's see what happens. I mean, guys could get, I mean, who knows? Matt Ryan could get benched. They could face Nick Foles. Who knows what's going to happen? Guys could get hurt.
We're all rooting for that, right?
I don't know.
The storyline.
Root for anybody to get hurt or get benched, but well, some people, but yeah, you never really know. But they don't face the elite guys like Mahomes and Brady, but they face some good quarterbacks: Dak, Kyler Murray. Matt Ryan's probably a Hall of Famer, I guess. Jared Goff's no good. I don't think so. Not a lot of elite guys. So I think it's going to be, and again, you think about, I mean, that string.
Before we get tweets, yes, we know Aaron Rodgers is on the schedule.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is pretty good. They did beat him in Green Bay. One of the Packers, like 5 losses over the last 3 years.
One of the strangest games looking back. Like, how in the heck did that team go to Green Bay and win?
Won convincingly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was crazy. But yeah, so I think they're more equipped. I mean, I don't know how many rookie head coaches and defensive coordinators are gonna really hold their own against Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady and Dak Prescott and Derek Carr in the first 6 weeks of their time together. I mean, that's a lot to ask. So really wasn't that surprising that they lost those games.
My last takeaway from Gannon was about Jordan Davis specifically. And I think it's the biggest question around Jordan Davis is how much can he offer as a pass rusher? And look, none of us truly know the answer to that yet, but it seems like they're going to ask him to do it. I mean, they're going to ask him to do different things than Georgia did. And Gannon even said at times, they're going to say, hey, pin your ears back and go get the quarterback. I'm looking forward to watching that because it's, we didn't see it at Georgia because he wasn't asked to do it. And there are going to be times where they don't ask him to do it here too. They're going to be happy with him eating a double team or stuffing the run. But there are going to be times too where it's going to be attack that gap and get upfield. And I'm looking forward to watching that.
Yeah. And you don't draft a guy 13th just to stop the run. You just don't do that. And no matter how good he is at it. So he's got to be more than that. He's got to be a 2-dimensional player. And Gannon didn't hesitate to. I mean, he was effusive in talking about his ability to get to the quarterback. He said Georgia didn't ask him to do that, and they didn't need to ask him to do that. They had 100 other guys who could do that. And also I think playing time was, I think when you look at his fitness in college, it made sense to limit him to 30 plays. That's something he's got to work on this level. But Gannon did not shy away from the fact that he believes he can be a real force in the passing game. And I think that's what's going to make it a good pick. I mean, if he can do that, if he can do both those things, he doesn't have to be a 10-sack guy, but just a guy who can make a difference in the passing game and get some pressure and take up some blockers and open some holes for other guys and just wreak havoc in the passing game. If he can do that, then it's a great pick.
Did you see that photo of Jordan Davis and Fletcher Cox hanging out?
Yeah, it was interesting. Fletcher looks like Mark McMillan in that picture.
There's nothing I love more than photos like that where a big person looks little because they're next to a bigger person.
Yeah, that's what it was like. That's like when you see like Mulata standing next to Lane. Like Lane's like the biggest person I've ever seen, and then like there's Mulata who's like hulking over him. Yeah, they've got some big boys. He is huge.
Do you ever see there's a one of my favorite photos? Any photo with Yao Ming next to someone, like Yao next to Shaq, is hilarious because Yao's just like bigger than everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that stuff.
Yeah. I remember when the Sixers had Manute Bol,
Mm-hmm.
and our Sixers writer used to come back to the office and say, they list him at 7'6". He's not 7'6". He's like 12 feet tall. So like I've stood next to him when he's standing next to a guy who's 7'3", and he's like 3 feet taller. He's like 12 feet tall. Like, it's just so these guys are so.
I was trying to figure out, like, when do you think the first time we see Jordan Davis and don't immediately go, oh, he's big?
I don't think that's ever going to happen unless he goes down to 285 and say, boy,
I don't think.
But he can't play at 345. I know that. Yeah. He's at 340. He's at 345, and I think he even said himself 330. I think he said 330.
330s.
330s, yeah, 335. With his frame is fine, but yeah, 345 is a little high.
James Bradberry.
Yeah.
Got a chance to meet him today.
Very serious-minded guy.
He is.
The opposite of Slay.
And, well, yeah, next to Slay, anyone's going to look pretty serious. I was impressed by him. You know what I was most impressed by was his answer about the timing of his release by the Giants, because he said from a business perspective, he understands why they did it. They were trying to get something for him. I'm still a little confused as to why they couldn't if there was all this interest in him after. I think it was reported 11 teams reached out. But they couldn't get anything for him, and they released him in May, which is not great if you're a free agent. You don't want to be released after everyone's already spent their money. So he said, from a business perspective, I understand it personally, didn't like it. And I think that's a very mature approach to the situation.
Yeah, that's how it struck me as well. I guess when I say very serious-minded, very thoughtful guy. It's going to be interesting to see him and Slay because they're opposites. I mean, Slay.
Slay's thoughtful, just in a different way.
Yeah, I guess. But they're going to be. And the one time Bradberry laughed or smiled was when he was asked about Slay. And he said, I didn't realize he was as funny as he is. You can just imagine a new guy coming in and there's Slay in the meeting room. Like,
there's no off switch.
He's the class clown. I mean, there is no off switch. I mean, he is something else. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like him when it comes to just. There was an episode of MASH. You ever watch MASH?
No,
not a MASH guy. MASH probably one of the best shows ever. But Alan Alda was like the main character, and he was always cracking jokes. He was always always constant. I mean, that was constant one-liners, and in the midst of all this horror of war, he was always cracking jokes, like in the middle of surgery, in the middle of whatever, getting bombed. And there was one episode where I think it was Wayne Rogers' character made a bet. He said, I'll bet you can't go, I think it was one day without making a joke. And like he kept setting him up for jokes, and Alan Alda would bite his lip. And finally, after, he had like 20 minutes to go, and he just started cracking jokes, And that's what Darius Slay reminds me of. He can't stop. Like, they could lose 40-0. He'll come out cracking jokes because that's just his personality. And that's how he stays loose. And that's how he keeps the team loose and the secondary guys. And, I think, he doesn't overdo it where you're not getting your work done because he works hard and he's a diligent guy. And you can see when you watch him play, he's such a playmaker. But he's fun to be around. And Bradberry, he's just like, you can see Bradberry just being around this guy thinking, wow, this guy doesn't stop.
Yeah. It'll help, though. I mean, Bradberry's getting here late.
Yeah.
He is a veteran, but he's in a new room where at least that secondary, a lot of them have played together. Yeah. So he gets a chance. I think it'll help him come out of his shell a little bit. And you know what's funny with Slay last year, and this is off topic, but I really do think Slay's presence helped Devontae Smith feel more comfortable earlier than he would have otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, he really takes that seriously. And I think now you're going to have Bradberry and Slay. I mean, they don't go ones-on-ones a lot, but they will. And they'll have those guys with AJ and Devontae.
I'll tell you what, Nick does it more than Doug did.
Yes, he does.
Doug was almost never ones versus ones.
Yeah.
Nick, I mean, he has to because the practices are only 20 minutes. So he got to maximize.
You got to get their work in. That's the only way to do it. Up in the Lehigh days, Andy would do it like maybe twice a summer,
mm-hmm.
and they would go full team. they called it the move the ball period, and it was like they would literally scrimmage ones against ones, with down and distance and everything, and that was fun. But yeah, they do it more. But that'll be great work watching those guys. You have Bradberry and AJ Brown are the new guys, and then Slay and Devontae are the returning guys, and it's going to be great work between them all.
Kind of what Bradberry told our John Clark at the airport. He expounded on a little bit the scheme fit here, and I think we all kind of understand that a lot of zone coverage from the Eagles last year, and Bradberry allowed that. Yes, that can change. Like maybe they won't be as heavy zone based on circumstances, but based on what we saw from the Eagles last year, will be a lot of zone coverages, and Bradberry excels there. So I think that's what he's saying when he says that the scheme fits him. He works better when he's able to keep his eyes on the quarterback and use his IQ to make plays. They're going to use a lot of zone, Rube. I mean, they're not going to become a press man team all of a sudden.
Right. And again, he used the word versatility. I mean, he can play man as well.
Sure.
And he's comfortable doing it. But he's comfortable doing both. And I think that was again the word that Gannon used talking about Bradberry was he's physical, he's got good size, he's smart. I think he said smart 3 times. He's a really smart guy. And he's versatile. He can play any kind of coverage. So I think you see a much improved pass defense, not just because they've upgraded in the secondary, but because they're going to get a lot more pass pressure. They should get more pass pressure. We'll see.
Yeah. You want to go through your top cornerback duos?
Yeah.
Because it is a fascinating question here because you have Slay, Bradberry, and not for this exercise, but in general, Avante makes it a really good trio. The problem is there's limited amount of trios because nickel defense wasn't as prevalent when some of these other corners were playing. So if you were to go trio, then it would change things. But as far as duos, just Slay and Bradberry, where do you think they end up?
Well, let me go through this first. Let's do that, and then we can kind of place them. And that's why I did just the top 2. I was thinking about doing trios, but I mean, when I started covering football, like nobody went 3 wides. Like your third cornerback was basically a guy who played outside if your starter got hurt.
Yeah.
And then I mean, it wasn't until probably the 90s, I guess, teams started using three wides. But even then, teams would cover the slowest one with a linebacker, with a safety or a linebacker or something. So anyway, so I'll go through all 10 real quick here. Should we do that?
Sure.
Number 10, Joe Lavender and John Outlaw. They were on some bad Eagles teams in the mid 70s, but they were both real playmakers. The two of them had a combined 13 interceptions in their 3 years together. Number 9, Irv Cross and Ben Scotty. Irv Cross, who we know as a real trailblazer in broadcasting, he was a really good player, spent his whole career with the Eagles. Ben Scotty was a guy from North Jersey. I think he went to St. Benedict's Academy, actually. They were the ones that always would beat Morristown in the Tournament of Champions in tennis. And they played together in the early 60s, and they were very good. Number 8, I went Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby. They didn't play a lot together. Darby was hurt a lot, and Mills was hurt, I guess, in 18. And then by the time Mills went to safety, Darby was gone. But when they were – I mean, you got to give them props for what they did in 17. And Darby didn't even play the first half of the year. He was hurt. But once they started playing together, they haven't done anything else in their career to indicate that they would play up to that level. But they were both phenomenal the second half of 17 and into the playoffs. Number 7, Eric Allen and Mark McMillan. Now, Eric Allen will pop up on this list again, higher up, but Mark McMillan, what was he, 5'7", 154. But when Ben Smith got hurt, Mark McMillan, he was a nickel guy, he was a slot corner. He came in as a 5'4" outside or 5'7" outside corner and held his own, and he was a starter for 3 years in the mid-90s across from Eric Allen. Number 6, there's another guy. I didn't want to double up too many guys, but Sheldon Brown and Asante Samuel, I had to. They only played 2 years together. You remember the 1 year Lito, Asante, and Sheldon were all here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of awkward and tricky, but Sheldon and Asante were the starters. And they were terrific at the 2008 NFC Championship game season. They were the starters, and they were very good.
It's funny because we're so conditioned to think of Lito Sheldon, but you're right. There was that weird crossover.
Yeah. Number 5, Tom Brookshire and Jimmy Carr. Tom Brookshire, another guy you think of, as a broad. I mean, he's really started out WIP back in the day. They were the starters in the 1960 NFL Championship team. They played together 3 years. They were both Pro Bowlers. They both had a ton of interceptions. The Eagles, during that 3-year period, won more games than any team in football. And then you go to number 4, Herm Edwards and Roynell Young. Now, when I started covering the Eagles, Roynell couldn't play anymore. He couldn't run. He had gone from like really elite to just couldn't play like overnight. But for a good long time, including that Super Bowl season in '80, Herm and Roynell were terrific together. Herm Edwards had 33 interceptions in his career and never made a Pro Bowl. It was the 8th most interceptions ever by a cornerback who didn't make a Pro Bowl. Then we get to number 3, and that's Eric Allen and Ben Smith, who, again, they didn't play that much together. Ben Smith got hurt in '91 in that game in Cleveland that Jim McMahon started, and the Eagles came back from way down. Ben Smith ended Bernie Kosar's NFL record for consecutive passes without interception in that game. And later in the game, he tore his ACL. He missed the rest of that year and the entire next season, '92. But in their 2 years, as 1.5 years as starters, I mean, Eagles had one of the all-time greatest defenses in history, 1991. And then in '93, Ben Smith came back, eventually played safety, but in '93, he was still a corner. And I'll tell you what, if Ben Smith hadn't gotten hurt, or if it happened now and they, the way they are with ACLs and he misses, the rest of the year and he's back, those guys would have been as good as anyone, but it wasn't meant to be. And then number 2, Lito and Sheldon. I mean, what can you say? They were together for a good long time. They were both drafted in '02. They were here together till '08. They started together till '07. Eagles were pretty much a perennial playoff team. And during that stretch, Eagles had the 4th best pass defense in the NFL during the stretch that they played together. They had a combined 37 interceptions and 6 pick sixes in their careers as Eagles. And number 1, you could ask 100 Eagles fans, they would tell you the same thing. Bobby Taylor and Troy Vincent, both Pro Bowlers. And it's funny because the last time the Eagles had 2 Pro Bowl corners I was going to lead and write about how they were the last ones. It was actually Nnamdi and DRC. So that kind of invalidated that stat. So I didn't mention it, but
last Eagles Pro Bowlers
as Eagles. Yeah, I could have done that. But Bobby was drafted in '95 out of Notre Dame in the 2nd round. And then Troy came the next year as a free agent. And they were just that perfect match of, cerebral and Troy was really physical and tough on the line of scrimmage, but a really good playmaker. And Bobby had that length. He could match up with Michael Irvin. That's kind of how he made a name for himself, by shutting down Michael Irvin. He had great size and great length, and he would just knock down a lot of balls. I don't think knockdowns were a stat yet. Maybe late in his career, but that secondary was as good as anyone. I mean, Doc, Bobby Taylor, and Troy Vincent. What else can you say? So
Al Harris mixed in there.
Al Harris was a slot and then went to Green Bay and became a Pro Bowler. Picked off Hasselbeck, right, in that playoff game. After Hasselbeck said, we're going to take the ball and go down and win it. Yeah. Al Harris picked him off, pick 6, right? Yeah, that was that was a good one. If you're going to make a list of the top slots in Eagles history, Al Harris would be in there. Back then slots didn't get paid. I mean, you got paid like a backup.
Yeah, and he was sometimes, I think he would mix in, because he was just so fast. If I recall this correctly, he would mix in just if there was a speed guy out there.
Yeah.
You'd take him.
Yeah. So, when you look at that list, now one thing, I mean, James Bradberry has a 1-year contract. So
and Slay's over 30.
And, he's at the point where corners sometimes start regressing. We don't know. He played great last year, takes good care of himself. But it's going to be hard for them. And Bradberry could always resign here. They could, work something out. That's always possible. But, I think it would be disappointing if they're not, based on 1 year, if they're not in that top 5. They should be. With their pedigrees and their salaries, they should be a top 5. Now, whether they would be ranked that high if they only play 1 year together, maybe not. But they're both terrific playmakers. They're both very active and they knock balls down. They intercept balls. I think they have They have everything it takes. They're both smart guys. They love ball, as they say. Dave hates that phrase. So, yeah, I don't see any reason they can't be a top 5 combo.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's real exciting.
It's been a while. Yeah, you look at the list. I mean, from the mid-'90s to, like, late in the Andy Reid era, they had either Bobby and Troy or Lito and Sheldon. It's been kind of piecemeal since then. So, it'd be nice to get some stability back there.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Josh Sweat, it was our first chance talking to him today since a really weird situation in that he missed the playoff game. And he gave us some insight today as to what happened. He basically had internal bleeding, an arterial issue that they needed to cauterize it. And he said if it was like another week, he probably would have been able to play if they won in Tampa. But scary stuff.
Yeah, he said he was just sitting at home and started feeling lightheaded and I guess discomfort in his abdominal area. He says it's the first time we've talked to him since December, since down the stretch. And so we didn't really know what happened. We just heard that there was a very serious thing, and he sounds like he was pretty scared about it. He said until they told him, look, it's a really easy fix. He said it just took a couple minutes, which I'm not sure about that, but might have seemed like a couple minutes. But they fixed him. He said he's at no greater risk than for anything to happen again. He doesn't know what caused it, which is a little scary. It could be football related, it could be from a hit, but he doesn't know that. He plays a very physical, violent sport, but very scary stuff. And I know it killed him to miss that game. And he was really starting to come on the second half of last year. He had, what did he finish with? What do you have? 8.5 sacks, something like that. 7.5, 8.5. I know he only had 3.5 through like 12 games. So he was starting to make some plays. I keep forgetting you're actually in the room. You're sitting right there. I just see you on the screen here. It's kind of weird. You're not used to it. They could have used him in that Tampa game. Not that they would have won.
He finished with 7.5.
7.5. So
ended up making the Pro Bowl as an alternate.
Yeah, made the Pro Bowl. He said one of his goals for this year is to make it right from the start, so he doesn't have to sit and wait and make it as an alternate. So he was pretty, humble about making it. I think he understands that he did not have a great year. He's a Pro Bowler, but you don't think of 7.5 sacks as being a Pro Bowl year. He's gotten better each year, so you'd like to see him get to double figures.
I think that's realistic.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this group of pass rushers because Reddick has 23.5 sacks the last couple of years. Barnett's never really panned out. BG, we just don't know. Gannon said he's had to slow him down in practice, and he's got to remind him he's still got a few months before the season. He goes all out all the time. Says he looks good in practice, which sounds like BG. He's not somebody who's ever going to take a rep off. But it'll be interesting to see how the whole group, works well. Whether they work well together and whether they can actually get some pressure. It's still a big question mark to me, even with the additions.
Yeah. The good thing for Sweat is he has that contract now, not entering a contract here. And he doesn't like to talk about that knee very much. But it was always like, I think it was always in the back of everyone's mind. Like, is this guy ever going to make money in the league?
Yeah.
And he did now. So I think that helps him probably feel a little bit of ease. And his knee's never been an issue,
right,
in the NFL. But you see, like I think about like Jay Ajayi, and that poor guy never made real money in the league. He had a degenerative issue with that knee, and then he tore his ACL, and it was over.
He was a late pick, right? He was like
Ajayi.
Yeah, was he a 6, maybe a 5 or a 6?
Yeah.
So he's not getting he's getting good money
for regular people.
For regular people, but your rookie deal is it's not huge, relatively huge.
And Sweat was a 4, so it's not like he was getting okay money,
right?
But yeah, he finally broke the bank a little bit, and I'm really curious to see what his ceiling is because physically, you look at him, you're like, this guy can rush the passer. He's 6'6", he's long, but he's gotten much bigger. The one comp that's always going to be there when you see his body type is we all thought it was Curse, right?
Curse, yeah.
Like he walks in here like that guy looks like Javon Curse
Yeah.
body style. I mean, we'll see. I don't know if he has quite that level of pure crazy athleticism that Curse had at one point, but so it's a fun player. And
Curse had that unbelievable first step.
Yeah.
And Sweat doesn't have that.
Yeah. But Sweat's a very good player. And I think he's still getting better.
We'll see. It's a big year for him.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's do something. So I have this depth chart that I put together. Let's go through the offense today.
Okay.
Let's save defense for later in the week. That makes sense?
Yeah.
All right. So I have it in front of me, and we'll just go position by position. I won't mention everyone because there's some deep backups here. But quarterback, I think we obviously know the top two, Hurts and Minshew. I have Carson Strong as the third stringer, Reed Sinnett as the four. I think that's pretty clear.
320,000 reasons Carson Strong will be the number 3, right?
Yeah, I think so. What do you think about Minshew? Do you think
I still think he's getting traded?
What would it take to get him if you're another team?
What do you got?
Well, I mean, I don't think they'd give him away for a 5th-round pick. Do you?
Yeah.
You would trade Gardner Minshew for a 5th-round pick?
I think so. Maybe a 4.
It would.
Maybe a conditional 5.
It would take at least a 4 because, look, this is a team now with serious playoff aspirations.
Well, I think a lot of it's going to have to do with Carson Strong's health.
Yeah.
And what kind of camp he has. If you're comfortable with him as a number 2, but I mean, that's a lot to ask. Look, I mean, who was the last undrafted quarterback to play for this team as a rookie? Brad Gable, probably 91. So, to play meaningful snaps, that is. So, yeah, that's a lot to ask. So maybe, and I think Gardner Minshew is one of the best backups in the league. So you're probably right. Probably take more like a 4 or better.
Yeah.
Maybe a conditional 4.
I think he's worth having as a piece. He could end up playing. And based on the numbers we've seen over the years, he is going to play, right? Like quarterbacks get hurt.
Yeah. Around here.
Everywhere, but here. Running back, the pecking order here, Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott. I have Jason Huntley ahead of Kennedy Brooks, but I think it could come down to a competition for that last running back spot.
Yeah, interesting. They didn't bring anybody in as far as, veteran or anybody with experience. Kennedy Brooks, nice college player. We'll see. Gainwell had a Boston Scott. I agree with. And we just talked to Boston Scott today about how his role seems to change week to week. Never really knows going into a game he's going to have 30 snaps or none. But I really like Gainwell. Gainwell gets in the end zone. Well, they both do. Scott and Gainwell both do. And it's a big year for Miles Sanders. We've talked about that a lot. I mean, his future kind of is riding on him staying healthy, staying as productive as he's been, but doing it week in and week out, which he's just never done, or he hasn't since his rookie year. So it's a big year.
All right, receiver. I think the 3 starters are pretty clear. Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, and then Quez Watkins in the slot. We all agree on that. The 4 is Zach Pascal. The 5, and this isn't going to make people very happy, is still Jalen Reagor. And I have these broken up into position. Who do you think the 6 is?
Well, I think it's gonna come down to training camp. I mean, it depends what you're looking for. I mean, you want Greg Ward around just because he's such a good slot. He's not going to give you a lot of explosion. I can see a guy like Britton Covey coming in and having a great camp. I can see Devin Allen coming in and having like an impressive camp. He hasn't played in a while. That might be a lot to ask. But Britton Covey's a guy, John Hightower's been in the league 3 years now. I mean, I could see him. But Britton Covey, I think, is a guy he's going to be like the training camp darling.
I can see that.
People are going to fall in love with him, and he's going to get interviewed every day by 100 people. That's going to give us an opportunity to get guys one-on-one around the corner when, we're actually interviewing guys that are going to make the team. So, but, Ward's a safe bet just because, 2 years ago, he led the team in catches. He actually has the most catches on the team over the last, I think, 5 years. Just because 4 years probably, not 17, but just I guess it's going to depend what they're looking for.
Yeah, if I had to pick Greg Ward or Britton Covey right now, I'd take Covey, just because there's a little more explosion and he has the return capability.
Right. Yeah. Greg Ward is he's a solid guy. He's going to catch the ball and get you 5 yards on 3rd and 6. No, on 3rd and 4. But he doesn't give you a lot down the field or anything.
All right, tight end. Dallas Goedert at the top. I have Grant Calcaterra ahead of Jack Stoll. I could have had Stoll ahead of Calcaterra, then Tyree Jackson, Richard Rodgers, Noah Togoa, and JJ Arcega-Whiteside. I have Calcaterra ahead of Stoll, but they're such different players that I think there's room for both of them on the team in their respective roles.
Yeah, but I think, like you pointed out a week or two ago or after the draft, I mean, you can't make Stoll just your blocker and Calcaterra your guy who's going to catch a few balls, because you're telegraphing what you're doing on that play. So it's going to come down to, can Stoll catch the ball at all? Can Calcaterra become useful as a blocker? I think Stoll's probably more likely to be a okay receiver than Calcaterra okay blocker, at least from the start. I would put Stoll number 2. I'll bet Stoll plays more snaps this year than Calcaterra.
I feel a side wager coming on. I want to see him in training camp first.
Oh, well, that's no fun.
Yeah. But Jay Jaw, I have it dead last. Just it's a tough transition. And he's 6'2". He's been bulking up. I don't know where he's at right now weight-wise, but that's not an easy transition. You think, he's already a run-blocking receiver. He can just transition to tight end. It's not that simple. It's more complicated than that.
Yeah, and you're blocking in a different part of the field. And it's a lot to ask. 2nd-round pick, Dave. 2nd-round pick, and he's already trying him in new positions.
Do you think he'd stick around on the practice squad?
The problem is, if he gets cut, now he's like not even in shape to be a wide receiver. But if
you're thinking, hey, we know this is a project. We know it's not going to be completed in a few months. Maybe that's already their plan.
Maybe. I guess it depends if he's a total disaster as a tight end or not. If he's not, maybe you keep him around the practice squad. But if I'm J-Jaw, I might be like, you know what? I need to go somewhere else where I have a chance and get myself back in wide receiver shape and try to make a team doing that. But, I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to the offensive line. 4 of the spots feel pretty good about. Jordan Mailata's the left tackle. Landon Dickerson's the left guard. Some guy named Jason Kelsey's the center. Right tackle is Lane Johnson. Right now, I have the right guard as Isaac Seumalo. Do you agree with that?
I think they're going to cut him.
Do you?
I do.
You think they could trade him instead of cutting him?
I'm sure they'll try. I'm not sure how tradable he is. He hasn't been healthy the last couple of years. The older guy.
Relatively older.
Yeah, was he 28?
Yeah.
He got 1 year left. I think Sua is going to be starting right guard.
Interesting. So you would start Sua instead of Jack Driscoll.
Yeah, I think they like Jack Driscoll as that swing guy, backup right tackle, backup guard. And he's had injury issues of his own, too.
Yeah, I think if it's not Seumalo, it will be Driscoll.
Quite possibly. I think they really like Opeta.
Okay. How about Juergens? Any shot at being a guard?
I think that would be more of an emergency at his size. I think he could get you through a game if you needed him.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're gonna. I don't see him competing for a guard spot. I think they'll try to get him as comfortable as possible playing center, kind of in preparation for the handoff, whenever that is.
Andre Dillard, is he here?
I don't think so. I think they'll trade him too.
Okay.
Trade all these guys.
Yeah, you're getting Stout's going crazy right now.
I'm really curious what Dillard's value, if he has any value.
I think he would. The problem is I don't know if it's enough to trade him. I think he can play. I don't know how good he'll be, but I think he's an NFL tackle.
Yeah, it doesn't help his value that he only plays on the left side. I think it would behoove them to maybe get him some playing time in the preseason at right tackle, get some film on him at right tackle, and hope he plays well enough to get someone's attention.
Yeah, I mean the only tape with him at right tackle is a disaster. So
that first half of that Seattle
yeah,
game.
I mean, so if you're
that was also 3 years ago. So
true, but he hasn't played there since.
Right.
So I think he can play in the league.
Yeah, I do too. He'll be somewhere. I mean, he'll be in the league.
And the Eagles do have, they were able to drop Nate Herbig because they have all this depth on the line. They still have Reuben Clark,
Yeah.
Who's kind of a forgotten veteran, but he can be a swing tackle too. If they needed to say, that Isaac's gone, like you say, Driscoll's the right guard, well, then you have Reuben Clark as your swing tackle.
Yeah. I'm sure Driscoll can get you through a game at left tackle too. We haven't seen him play there, but he can play both guards and right tackle. So he's a smart guy. He's versatile. Wouldn't be surprised if we see him get some work there with the threes.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it. We'll get to the defense later in the week. That's fun though. I like doing that.
Yeah, it was good.
All right. The last thing, Eagles Autism Challenge took place over the weekend. It's a really cool event. And it's amazing how much it's grown in just a few years here.
Yeah, I've done it a couple of years. I was unable to do it this year, and I really missed it because it's really fun. They do a great job creating a family atmosphere, and the bike races and the runs finish in the middle of the link. Like they finish at the 50-yard line, and so you come in down the tunnel and run across the field, and they have all these banners and bunting up, so you feel like you're.
Joe Banner's there?
Yeah, Joe Banner's there. You're everyone's kind of cheering, and like Spadero's there, like announcing it, and it's a great atmosphere. And then they have all these kids activities, face painting and all that stuff, autographs, pictures with players, all kinds of different activities and booths and stuff, and games. And they raised $4.1 million this year, and for just a really good cause. And you can still donate actually up through the end of the month if you want to. Just go to I believe it's EaglesAutismFoundation.org, or just go to the Eagles site and there'll be a link for it. And they've raised over $16 million, and 100% of the money goes to researching autism. And it's such a great cause, and it's something that's Jeff Lurie started this, and they've made this kind of the centerpiece of their charity work, the franchise, and they do great work. And
they're involved in other things. I do like that they kind of have this focused charity. It makes a bigger impact that way.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And the money goes to a lot of the money goes to groups right in the Philadelphia area that are researching.
Yeah, it's research, and it's for some programs too.
Yeah,
which is very helpful.
But it's a really fun day, and if you can be a part of it, there's so many ways to be a part of it. They have 3 different bike rides of varying distances, up to 50 miles, and the run is 5. It's a 5K. It goes down to the Navy Yard. As I point to the Navy Yard, which doesn't mean anything to people listening or even watching on YouTube, but it is right there. And the first year it poured all day, and it was kind of fun because everyone's you're in it together, and everyone's kind of enjoying.
There's a moment when it's raining like that where everyone just goes, "Well,
yeah, I'm completely soaked, so I may as well just stay soaked. It's not going to. Eventually, you're going to dry off, so who cares? But it's a great event, and if you were part of it, you know what I'm talking about. It's a really fun day, great atmosphere when you get back to the stadium, and they have different tables with players, and it
is cool to see like how many players show up, to support it,
and coaches.
Yeah. It was funny. There were some videos of players out there, and I retweeted one of them, and I had a few people say, it's probably written in their contracts they have to be there. It's not. I mean, it just isn't.
Yeah.
Now look, the owner has an event, you probably show up to it, but I do think they enjoy being a part of it. And it seems like every time I've seen them there, they're having a blast.
Yeah. I guess it was 3 years ago was the first time I talked to Matt Collins in like 2 years. It was the first time anyone saw him. I got a tweet from someone who said they met Jonathan Gannon at the one this past Saturday, and he was saying how nice a guy he was and how fired up he was about the season. And he said, "You're not really going to start Marcus Epps, are you?" And he said he just talked for the next 5 minutes about how good Marcus Epps is.
That sounds about right.
And the guy's like now a believer in Marcus Epps. So that's the kind of day it is. You kind of interact with the coaches and the players, and yeah, it's a fun day.
We saw that really cool video, the fan meeting Jason Kelsey. She just loses it.
Yeah, that was great. Cool. That's the kind of day it is.
Yeah. All right, you got anything else?
No.
All right, if you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. Those 5-star reviews really do help us. So that's all we got. We'll talk to you later in the week. For Reuben, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye.